Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. It's so good to see you at last. I remember last time I invited you to join me on the Image series with John Senaya. I'd like to have you know that every Wednesday at 12 noon, we stream live. And it would be nice for you to have us be your good company every Wednesday, like I said, at 12 noon, and even on your social media handles. At Instagram, you can go to Click TV Africa. So, today we'll be talking, like I said, about the Image series. And what the Image series talks about is selling skills and speech skills. So, if you're a small or medium sized enterprise or a business person, if you're a master of ceremony or a church minister, it would be nice to share this little few hints with me at this time every Wednesday, like I said, at 12 noon. I'm happy to have a friend with me. His name is Ayo.
Hi there.
Ayo will be asking me questions that you also have an opportunity of asking towards the end of the program. So, let's go. I've called on small scale enterprises, pastors, church ministers, politicians,
MCs.
masters of ceremony, comedians, people who see the need to win before the start. And what does that mean? If you have a sales pitch or have a presentation to make, you have to prepare well ahead. And that's the topic for today. Winning before you start. Now, what does that entail? Winning before you start means preparing, preparing, preparing. What it does to you is it gets you into the right frame and it makes you ready for the battle ahead. Now, preparing for your presentation will come in different fashions. If you are a small medium scale enterprise, what it means is that you'll be preparing to make a sales pitch to a possible client who has probably expressed his interest in having your services. If you're a pastor, it means that you're preparing to sell an idea or send a message across to your congregation. Sometimes you may be what you call a guest at another church or environment, and you need to put a message across. So you need to know what to do, the steps to take before you go on that journey. So prepare, 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 so you can win before you start. Now, a few questions I'm sure will come to your mind as I speak with you. Now, what are the things you need to do by way of preparation? One, we always say that you should do your research. First, you have to profile your client, know exactly what your client wants from you at this sales pitch. Is it going to be an instant sales pitch? That is, are you aiming to do an instant sale or an outright win at a sales pitch? Or is it a sales pitch or presentation that should draw you closer to the client by way of explaining or creating an interest in your service? Now, these are the things you need to consider. One, you have to start a conversation or start a relationship and make a contact with that client. That is very important. Now, what this does is that it immediately gives an impression of professionalism on your part to your prospect. What it does is that it gives you an opportunity to let your client know or your prospect know that you're actually interested in getting this business. It also helps you understand the client better. You, and if you're talking to an audience, it helps you understand your audience better. Now let's put it in the right pockets. We're talking different platforms now. We're talking about sales pitches, and we're also talking about sending messages across. Sales pitches will have to do with the companies, while sending messages across will have to do with people who speak directly to audiences like the church ministers. Now, it's important that you profile your client and you profile your audience. And what are you trying to get out of this? When you profile your client before a pitch, what it does is that it allows you to understand what business your prospect is actually into. It's never enough to assume that you know your client very well. So, you do up a questionnaire, possibly in a simple letter form, send it to the client, and get them to answer these questions. So for you, it's a win-win. It's an expression of interest, it's an expression of professionalism, and it also helps you to get more information. Now, if we're talking about profiling your audience and getting to know your audience better, what this does to you is that it allows you to put across a message to your clients or to your audience now, and it makes you express to them where you stand and allows you to know who they are. For instance, if you're a church minister and your topic of discussion or the central focus of your message has to do with marriages, immediately you're able to ask questions that have to do with couples or living together. So let's mix it up. Yes, we're talking about presentations and pitches at the same time, but the game plan is still the same. What we're saying in essence is that you need to do your research. You need to understand your audience. You need to make contact with your audience. You need to make friends with them and let them know that you're serious about this business. Now, in case you're just joining us, you're on to the image series with John Senaya. And John Senaya is going to take you for the next few weeks on tips that will help you win your business quickly. Now, let's talk about setting objectives for your sales pitch. That is very important. Now, when you get an invitation to a sales pitch, or you get an invitation to address an audience, or you get an invitation to talk about yourself or a subject to a specific audience, you need to know the objectives of that pitch. You need to establish the purpose of that speech or that pitch. You need to get a central message clear in your mind. And at the same time, you will need to anticipate any questions or objections that may come up during your sales pitch. So it's like putting yourself in the shoes of the client and imagining what they would want to know about you. It's all about preparing. So you also need to prepare your possible answers before you go on. Now, let's talk about composing your corporate profile and making this suit your client's needs. Now, your first contact with your client has to be impressive. They say that first impressions last.
Yes.
Now, your first impression has to be one that is very strong. It has to be one that will convey to your prospect that you're a serious-minded entrepreneur. So you need to compose your corporate profile, and what I mean by that is getting your stuff like your letterheads, like even the way you put the letters together. It has to be in a serious manner, in a way which will convey to your client that you really are worthy of their business. That means, in essence, that your corporate outlook has to be simple and yet impactful. You would need to use very simple language to convey your message so that you're not speaking above the heads of your prospects. And then you also need to review and practice your message well ahead of time. If your presentation was, for instance, in a week's time, we would expect that from maybe 3 days, possibly 2 days, depending on the size of the presentation, you would have been doing what we would call a dry run for the pitch or a dry run for your speech, so to speak. Now, it will be important to also have reference points stated. Reference points being what you have achieved, which other clients you've worked for, which product samples you have, or which other competitive services you have worked on. All of this helps your client, even before the date of the presentation, to be a lot more comfortable with you at the time you arrive. I was going to ask, are you going to cut in at any point?
I wanted to go a bit into the discussion, but I have to take you a bit back.
Perfect.
Now, you know, this is about making a sales speech and making a presentation.
Yeah.
And you know, Nigeria, you're talking about preparing before the time. More often than not, especially for SMEs, we have been trying to see the key person, maybe the MD. Then suddenly I meet him. There's no time. There's nothing like go and prepare your speech or go and prepare your presentation. It is as I say, the make or mar moment. Is there any way to prepare before that time, so that, because as at that time you are not even sure what the client wanted, but you knew this was your client, so you finally meet the decision maker and says, okay, what do you have?
Now, of course, of course, it is expected that what you have is what you have.
Yes.
It's not something that you're going to put together overnight. So I would expect that, yes, what you have by way of your product or your service or your message is already there. It's for you to properly articulate it in such a manner that your client, right, you may meet him in an elevator,
for example,
and you have just 2 minutes
or he's just going
to
into
express
his car.
to him. You have to be clear and concise as to what you want to do, right? If you have, say, just a few minutes, remember that this is not the actual presentation. You have to create an impact from the get-go. You have to let the client know at that point that this is who you are, this is what you're bringing to the table, and this is why you need their attention. So there will be room for follow-ups. You also have to let the client have your contact, which actually is the last thing, you know, that is expected on any sales speech. Right?
Yes.
Are you comfortable with that?
No. Or what I understand by what you said now means every time I make a pitch, prepared or unprepared, it's like a one-size-fits-all. Is that what you're saying?
The rules of the game are the same. The rule is that you always need to be prepared. One, prepared on your side by knowing your product or knowing what you have to offer. That is taken for granted. On the other side, you also need research to understand your client and their needs. So what does your client want? You need the research to be able to do that.
So that means I would have had the background information on the client, so that
Certainly.
once, as at the time I'm talking to the client, that particular client, I'll be talking to that client based on their need.
The knowledge.
Yeah, the knowledge of what I know they need.
And that's what I meant by profiling your client. You need to profile your client. On one of our sessions, I'll take you on what I call the prime purchaser's profile. Now, what this does is that it helps you to identify the client or your prospect, someone in the middle of the universe, someone that everyone will relate to, either up there or down there. It places the client, it defines the client and reduces him to one person. Could
Okay.
be an Ayo. So where does Ayo bank? Where does Ayo live? How many children does Ayo have? Such that everything you do is tailored towards Ayo.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do that in another session. I promise you that. And so, in essence, what we're saying is understand yourself, understand your client, and you should be able to bring the two together. Now, also impress your client well ahead of time by asking relevant questions, before the presentation date. This also helps improve your chances of winning before you start. And that's the topic for today. I want to remind you that this is the image series with John Senaya, and we're on Click TV Africa every Wednesday, 12 noon. I hope you'll join me every week for this session. Now, we have so much to talk about, and you'll find that over the course of maybe about 12 weeks till the end of this year, we will handle different topics. Like I said earlier, a skills and speech coach, and you'll gain a lot from me trying to know or understand what it takes to deliver a message or to deliver a service to your client. We'll see you in a few minutes, or rather in a few seconds. We'll just take a break at this time. Thank you. You're welcome back. This is Click TV Africa, and today we're talking about winning before you start. And the program, again, is the image series with John Senaya. I have with me
Ayo Emahiome.
Emahiome.
Hi everyone.
Ayo has thrown one or two questions at us, and all to fine-tune or in his mind what we really mean by winning before you start. Now, I'll remind you that this program aims at helping small and medium-sized enterprises, like they call them, SMEs, businessmen, masters of ceremonies,
Politicians,
comedians, church ministers,
pastors,
everyone who has a product, a service, or a message to sell. So it would be nice to hear from you. You can drop in on our social media handles. We're at Click TV Africa. These questions will always be answered promptly. Now, if we roll back a bit, I just want to remind you that today we've looked at what it is to win before you start. We've talked about the importance of being prepared for every sales speech or presentation that you make. We've also emphasized the importance of doing the research not only on your part, that is covering your own angle, but research as to what exactly the client wants. So when you research yourself, or you fine-tune what you know about yourself, and you research on the client, by the time you put them together, you're likely to be heading for a win. All of this we have talked about today, and funnily, it has to do with before the presentation itself. So, bottom line is that create an impression before the client meets with you, and it softens your landing at the time you're making the presentation. So, Ayo,
sir.
Would you want to fire any other question, or do I just fire on?
The question I would have loved to ask is on profiling. Profiling comes in different ways and in different angles, and even the questioning. A lot of customers, because of the insecurity in the society, are not comfortable giving you feedback on some of the questions you might want to ask, like telling them what exactly do you need that you want me to, that you would have loved me to do for you. Many that I've met get very uncomfortable. That why you say you have a product, bring it now. Why are you asking me what you know what you wanted, what you feel I wanted? So at the end of the day, we don't get feedback. So how do we break that ice?
Well, you see, you wouldn't blame any client who holds on to information, especially at that point.
Okay.
You haven't been engaged. You have not yet been appointed. So, yeah, every wise client would hold back on key information. But remember that what we're trying to achieve here is to make impressions.
Okay.
You want to make an impression, or you want to create an impression to your prospect that you are actually really, really interested in working on this account,
Okay.
right? And that you would love to know more. So if you don't get responses to certain questions, never mind. The aim is for you to show more interest by asking questions.
Okay.
So this helps a lot. I'll give you an example of how this has worked for me. I've worked as a copywriter, I think that was several years ago. And I remember that I met with a client who had very strong religious inclinations. And while talking to the client, I discovered that she didn't like the color red.
Okay.
And that alone, helped us in the presentation of what we did. We avoided that color red, and we were able to key into the kind of language that she would love, and possibly that may have helped us.
That's what I'm
to
talking
get that
about. How
account.
did you get? Because it's not I can't see anybody walking down the road and say, what's your favorite color? Which color is it you don't like? So that's the parts I'm talking about. Those key information that would actually help
yes,
you.
Yes, you see, there is no harm in requesting for an informal meeting
It's,
of some sort, or if you can have an interesting questionnaire that you will send to clients.
Okay.
For instance, I used to have what you call the client's checklist. And what I used to do was to call up the client and say, thanks for your invitation, but before we can attend your meeting or your presentation, we would love for you to kindly answer these questions.
Okay.
And then we ask a few questions, 10, 15 questions, questions that really may not force the client to reveal information that they don't want. But again, I remind you that what we're trying to do is to express our interest. That immediately puts you ahead of that competitor who doesn't even react, who doesn't even acknowledge the client's invitation, right?
Yeah.
So it already puts you a step ahead of the others. So that's a tip for you on winning before you start. I hope that you will join me again next week, Wednesday, 12 o'clock, on this same station, Click TV Africa. And if you'd love to, you can go to our social media handles, and at Click TV Africa, we'll always be there for you. I hope you've enjoyed this week's session. I hope you have.
It was very enlightening. As in, there are things I used to think about. I have a different outlook right now.
Very good. And that's the whole intention.
That's it.
So join us next week for another interesting package on Click TV Africa, when we bring you the Image series with John Senaya. It's been fun being with you. On the Image series with John Senaya this week, we looked at winning before you start. Now, the good thing about it is that it's in the can. You can watch it as many times as you wish on our social media handles. And you can go on our website, Click TV Africa /the Image series. Join us and ask your questions. Subsequent programs will be trailed on our website. Past programs can also be viewed, and your questions will be well taken. The Image series with John Senaya, Click TV Africa, every Wednesday at 12 noon. See you.